Welcome to the Joy of Cooking podcast. Each week we set the table for a discussion about recipes and stories from the authors of Joy of Cooking, digging into kitchen victories, misadventures, and most importantly, what we are cooking and eating right now. We're glad you joined us at the table today. This is Sarah Marshall, filling in for Shannon, and my farmer's market basket is full of crunchy green vegetables, purple gold potato starts for planting, and huge radishes.
I'm Megan Scott, co-author of the 2019 edition of The Joy of Cooking. I'm a food editor by day and avoider of dish duty by night, and I'm fueled by Vietnamese instant coffee.
I'm John Becker, fourth-generation co-author and steward of The Joy of Cooking, America's oldest family-run cookbook. And I think baby tongs are wonderful. I'm using them for everything. I think that they're better than culinary tweezers.
Yeah, I was going to say, you don't like tweezers, but the baby tongs are where it's at.
We got like 2 pairs of these for... I think that we were having like an event at our house. It was like an anniversary type situation, and more people than we normally have over. And we had to serve like multiple things, and it was like, oh, okay, we should get these little tongs for serving. And now I'm using them for everything.
Yeah.
I don't think I know the difference between baby tongs and tweezers. What's the difference?
You get more leverage.
Okay. Yeah.
Pretty much. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just like your standard OXO type tong, but they're only like maybe 6 or 7 inches long. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like, oh, I have heat-proof fingers now.
Oh, okay. And do they have like a wide grip at the bottom or a small grip? Like that grabs the food.
It's wide, so it's like
wider.
a hinge. It has a hinge in it.
So real tongs, just baby size.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You described it perfectly.
So Sarah, you're going to plant potatoes?
Yeah, I got some potato starts from Sun Gold Farm. They do the farmer's market with me. And they're purple on the outside, but instead of being purple on the inside, they're golden potatoes. So they like crossbred a golden potato and a purple potato.
Sounds
pretty
beautiful.
excited about it. Yeah. So I just got the starts yesterday and we're getting all our beds ready. I know you are just planting potatoes for the first time, but that's one of my favorite things to plant with kids. We do it at the school garden and then we do it here because it's just so fun for them to dig around and find these little treasures.
Yeah. It's super fun.
Yeah. I'm excited about it. And mostly at the farmer's market right now, it's just green vegetables. Like that's all that there is, but I'm excited about it. So I got all kinds of things to stir fry and cook. And I didn't really know that I was preparing for talking about this episode, but I sure am. I'm ready.
Yeah, I love this time of year because it's like you're getting all these vitamins from the green vegetables after having, potatoes and parsnips and carrots all winter. And
it's like
freshness.
It's our exciting break into spring. So we're just getting there right now.
Any rhubarb sightings yet?
There is rhubarb. Yeah, I saw rhubarb at Marvin's stand at Winter's Farm. Oh, nice. First rhubarb sighting was this weekend. Yeah.
John, what are you thinking about food-wise this week? Things we've done, things we've eaten?
Really just the puttanesca that we made the other night with some of our home-canned albacore just to kind of make it more substantial. It was really good.
Yeah, that was really good.
Yeah, it did some some garlicky breadcrumb pan grattato type situation on top and with some kale Rabe. I guess it's a sign of spring. I mean, it's overwintered and it's perking up.
Yeah, I feel like Rabe, so I don't know how common this is in other places, but I feel like Rabes they feel like a very Portland thing. Like all the farmers do them and you can harvest them from basically any overwintered brassica. So I've seen cabbage Rabes, I've seen kale Rabe, I've seen Brussels sprout Rabe.
Collards.
Yeah, collards, all of the things.
Well, I think it's because it goes from winter where they can still grow that stuff and they're usually growing it in like a covered hoop house. But then all of a sudden we go from winter and there'll be like hail on the ground and then we'll get like 3 warm days of spring, which we call fake spring here. And then everything bolts. And so it was a way for farmers to be like, well, all these plants bolted, but we can still sell them. And then people know what to do with them now. But I think it was a little bit of a learning curve at the farmer's market. Like people would be like, oh, these are pretty and they kind of have flowers on them. What do I do with it? So it was like people sort of had to teach each other what to do, I feel like.
Well, and also like most of them are not nearly as bitter as actual broccoli Rabe.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's maybe a little confusing for folks.
Yeah. I think though, I think it's a good, I don't think you see it everywhere. I think it's definitely a Portland market thing.
What do you like to do with them?
I mean, I'll just cut them up and put them in stir fries usually. Or I wrote a recipe one time where I made like a vegetarian version of like a pork loin sandwich, but I roasted the broccoli and then I made a broccoli pesto with the Rabe and I did some kind of seasoning too where I dried the flowers. So I was trying to use like all the parts. So that's on our website.
That sounds
if you
really
want to
good.
make it. It's really good. So and then you melt provolone cheese on it, and it's like on a hoagie roll. So it's like a veggie version of like a pork roll sandwich.
Yum.
I had a really good broccoli melt in Seattle. I don't remember what all was on it, but it was like a lot of broccoli, a lot of cheese, delicious, crunchy bread. I definitely want to make that at home. I feel like that's a very easy thing we can make. John doesn't believe sandwiches are dinner, though. So he's looking at me like, no.
I mean, come on. Some sandwiches for sure. If you need a knife and fork for it, like an open face sandwich, or maybe like a smothered like torta ahogada type situation, I think of that as dinner. You've just outed me.
I guess we'll hash it out later.
I guess so.
This week, we'd like to welcome Kristin Donnelly to the table. Kristin is a cookbook author, recipe developer, copywriter, and cookbook coach. She was an editor at Food and Wine for 8 years and has written 2 cookbooks, The Modern Potluck and the Short Stack Editions book on cauliflower. She co-authored The Chef's Garden and Rice's Life and is currently working on a book about indigenous North American food with chef Sean Sherman and journalist Kate Nelson called Turtle Island. Kristin is also the co-host of a podcast called Everything Cookbooks, a podcast for writers, readers, and cooks. Kristin, welcome to the table.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so I guess I first heard about you from Sarah, I believe, because Sarah took your cookbook proposal workshop, and then
Yes.
I took your cookbook proposal workshop, which
I know.
was delightful.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's so delightful to have you both here and like at this table.
I know it's exciting to be like, I feel like we're your students in this situation. So it was like we were both excited for you to come on the call today.
Even though at the same time we're also peers in terms of, being in the food world all together. So yeah.
Yeah. Could you just tell us a little bit about your podcast, Everything Cookbooks?
Sure. So I co-host a podcast with 3 other cookbook authors, Andrea Nguyen, Molly Stevens, and Kate Leahy. And long before everybody got together on Zoom, we actually got together once a month on Google Meet, starting, I don't know, maybe 2016. And, just to gossip really and be like, is this normal? What are you getting paid? Just share those kinds of things, complain quite a bit. And I don't know, at a certain point, I think Kate and I actually had a conversation where I was like, hey, wouldn't it be cool to start a podcast about writing cookbooks? And then at our next meeting, Andrea kind of coincidentally also said, hey, wouldn't it be fun if we started a podcast about writing cookbooks? I'm like, funny, you should say. So we decided to try it. And what was funny was this was like maybe 2021, and I had been playing around with podcasting. I was podcasting about plants. There are still 12 episodes out in the world called for a podcast called Plant Out Loud. I had finished writing the book about the chef's garden. I was super excited about gardening and plants and our relationships as humans with plants. So I basically taught myself to podcast. So when they said they wanted to do it, I was like, all right, I got this. But I did say from the beginning, let's hire an editor because it's a lot of work and it'll just make it that much better. So that's how it started. Just really this coincidental taking these offline chats online. We said, let's do 12 episodes. Let's see what happens. And now we're well over 100 episodes.
Wow.
And yeah, in the middle of our 7th season. So
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah, that's on to that.
yeah, thanks. And we do it because we love it. And then every idea sparks another idea.
Can you talk a little bit about what you've been cooking and loving lately?
Sure. So I have a 12-year-old, and if you have kids who are, I wouldn't even call her picky compared to a lot of other children, but she still has her preferences. And if you have a child with preferences who's really vocal when talking about what she doesn't like, sometimes the joy of cooking is quite lost. I'll say. So lately, I've been asking her to send me videos of stuff she sees, and I'll try to make those things. And it is kind of hilarious, the things that she's attracted to, because there was something last week where it was like noodles, but they had butter and gochujang, as well as cream cheese and Parmesan cheese. Like it was just all
Whoa.
the things. I feel like there's a lot of recipes where it's just, especially all this umami, it's like all these like, every umami ingredient. So she'll send me stuff and I'll try to cook things based off of that. I don't always go fully with what they're doing because I'm like, this is too much or not going to turn out well.
How did that turn out? It sounds interesting, at least.
It is interesting. I ended up not following it, I'll say. I ended up doing gochujang, butter, tiny bit of sour cream. I can't remember if I feel like I added some kind of acidity component, maybe a tiny bit of vinegar to perk it up. And it was good. It was fun. I don't know if I'd be excited to make it again.
Yeah, I feel like cooking from a TikTok video I've done it a couple of times. And as someone who develops recipes, and I'm sure you can speak to this too, like trying to follow an internet recipe is just can be a wild experience. You never quite know what's going to happen, but I think it can be fun. And I think there are some really good ones, but yeah.
I would imagine if you're taking like a critical stance to it, as opposed to like getting really invested in the outcome, then it becomes fun. It becomes like, hate cooking, if you will.
Cooking or just curious, like, okay, I wonder what's going to happen. Let's see.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I'll just be like, I'll give it a go and see how this turns out. But I usually only do that if it seems like it's fast and there's not that many ingredients. But if it's something that seems like it'll be expensive and take a lot of time, I'm like, I'll leave that one to somebody else to figure out if it works. But my daughter too, like, I think like you were saying about like all the recipes on like TikTok and stuff, a lot of them will be like, they will be these umami bombs. But I think that's like how a lot of kids' palates are right now. And I think part of that is from eating like processed food, or like they're all into Takis and they're all into like, I see it with just even kids at the farmer's market, they'll eat spicier stuff, and how they tell me that they're like into it is they'll be like, I eat Takis, and I'm like, of course you do. Yeah. You'll totally be into my sauce, but it's different than what you're used to, and I think that that's sort of how they are. They're like used to all this flavor that comes in these like chips and sodas and things like that. So then they want it in their TikTok recipes too.
That makes total sense. And sometimes I do think it's about that shot at the end, because as you can imagine, those noodles had that really appealing sort of like orangey, saucy color. I promise it does look delicious. And then when you pull it, it looks really rich and creamy. So she's like, I want that,
Yeah.
But I think you're right, Sarah, about because she loves Takis and just that like palate attunement. So yeah, it's not necessarily, it is interesting. It's not a pickiness necessarily toward bland food all the time, although she loves anything super carby, I mean, like many children. But yeah, it's not always that it needs to be super bland and boring. It's actually more like she wants all the things. And then obviously something like a plain vegetable. A Rabe, as you were talking about, is really not appealing.
Yeah, it can't compete.
Yeah, how could it, right?
Do you see all the Rabes and things we were talking about at your farmer's market?
We do. There are some farmers who will overwinter. They grow all winter, but it's undercover. And a few of them will in the spring bring their bolted brassicas.
And what do you like to do with them?
I usually keep them pretty simple. So maybe just throw them into some fried rice at the end of cooking. Or I liked your ideas, though, with putting them on the sandwich with all the cheese. That sounds really good. Probably a way that my daughter would enjoy it more.
I feel like, you really have to check out the Rabe before you decide how to cook it, because sometimes the stems can be a little tough.
So true. Actually, I've made that mistake before, and you're kind of like, it's very fibrous, and you're sort of like pulling it. And,
yeah, not my
it's
favorite.
so true.
Yeah, better chop this a little fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, this week in our tasting segment, we are going to try some matcha tea that is from this week's sponsor, Mizuba. And Sarah's going to make us some tea. I absolutely love watching matcha be made. I like a drink that has accessories.
I know, right?
The little whisk is beautiful and so delicate.
So Lauren is a business owner here in Portland that owns Mizuba, and she gets the tea grown in Japan. She went to Japan and met a bunch of tea growers when she was on a trip, and she developed this company probably like 10 years ago. I do a lot of events with her, and she always has the little bowls with the matcha whisk, and I've never actually done it before, but she sent us one to do, so I'm pretty excited about it. I always see her at the booth next to me, like mixing up the matcha. But I thought while I'm mixing it, if you guys wanted to talk about any ways that you use matcha in recipes, I'm going to make a matcha latte today, but it's great for cooking. So I thought if you wanted to talk about it while I'm whisking.
Honestly, I haven't cooked a ton with matcha. The one thing I've used it for is ice cream. Because I think the flavor translates really well with the high fat dairy. It just has a really nice flavor, and the dairy kind of mutes any of the bitterness. So you just get this really smooth, grassy flavor. I think it would also be really good in popsicles now that I'm thinking of it, maybe with like raspberries or something.
Yeah, I would try that.
I was thinking it would fit into this episode in particular because we're talking about, getting kids to eat different things and kind of adventurous eaters. My daughter loves matcha. She started, I think, first having it in like boba tea. They would have it in like boba tea shops. So that's like one way. But I think popsicles would be a good, fun way to do it, especially if you mixed it with like kiwi or something. Like, I think that would be really cool. I'm just mixing this up. You can probably hear it, but I did some reading about it. And you're supposed to use the whisk to make it in an M and then a W back and forth. That's how you do it. There's like a technique to it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. I haven't made this with matcha necessarily, but I feel like you could. But like I think it's called ochazuke, where you use green tea as a broth. And I've done that with other green tea and maybe some rice and some hot smoked salmon and scallions, just as like a really simple little dish. But I'd be curious to try it with matcha.
That sounds delicious. It would look beautiful too.
Yeah, it smells really good. It smells almost like a mix between tea and the sea a little bit. Like it's a little bit, you guys can smell it. But I found a really fun recipe that I made for Adeline, and it was on Food 52, and it's matcha and tahini carrots with garlicky breadcrumbs. And that turned out really good. And then the other thing that I've done with matcha is put it into dough for doing like pot stickers, the pot sticker dough, and then they're bright green, but
beautiful.
You don't taste it so much. Like it's just like a little bit. It almost feels like a little bit of a seaweed wrapper almost, but it's like the matcha tea.
You're right. It does have almost a seaweed kind of scent to it.
Yeah.
It's really a little bit savory.
Yeah. So, and you just mix it up until you don't see any more chunks, and then I'm going to pour it in with some steamed milk, and then you guys can try it.
Delicious. This matcha is really high quality. I know that Lauren works really hard to bring super high quality matcha. Like a lot of times the stuff you get at a regular grocery store it's not as flavorful.
Well, you can tell because it doesn't smell like anything, and it's not as bright. This is
the
like
color
bright
isn't
neon
as
green,
vibrant.
I'm going to try to pour this without spilling it all over the recording equipment. We'll see how I do.
Sarah, don't you also have a recipe in your preserving cookbook for matcha? Is it chia pudding or overnight oats?
It's applesauce. It's a can. Yeah. So it's matcha tea applesauce that you mix the matcha in. I actually used Lauren's matcha in that recipe. We were neighbors when I was developing the cookbook at an event, and I took some of her matcha tea home, and then that inspired the recipe in my book. But so it's instead of just making applesauce, it's applesauce, and you make the matcha tea and whisk it in. So it's a little bit like green, glowy green, and then it has like cinnamon and ginger in it. And so when I was developing the recipe, we were eating it for breakfast with like nuts and fruit and things like that. So you could just open the jar and have like breakfast ready to go. I think I called
Chia
it
pudding's
something.
a fun idea, though.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, you ready?
I'm ready. It's beautiful. That's really nice.
So good. I like it with the milk. And she makes these nice recipe cards too that tell you exactly how to do it to put milk in and says you can add sweetener. But I thought this would be a nice thing for kids too. Like even if you did it like a hot cocoa, like a matcha hot cocoa, it would be a fun way to get them like the antioxidants from the tea, but it would be like a kid-friendly green drink.
Yeah.
And I wonder, like in a smoothie, because that's something I will
that's a good
often do
idea.
with my daughter, especially when, I don't know, she does so many activities and you're in middle school. Like I don't have a lot of control over like what she eats every single day, I would say at this point. So when I'm feeling like, oh my gosh, I just need to get a bunch of vitamins in you, I usually make some kind of smoothie.
Yeah.
I feel like matcha would be a nice addition for that.
Yeah, I love this particular brand because it just is it tastes so clean. Like it doesn't have any of that super, sometimes I feel like you get it and it's really bitter.
Yeah, and I have to say, I think that's a really fun experience to have the whisk. Like, I think that's a way you to like. I think we can talk about it more later, but how I like to get kids involved in things is really to make it interactive. And so I think this is a good, fun way to do it. Like they'd get into it, into whisking the tea up because it's almost like magical, turning this powder into this green, cool liquid.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a ritual.
Mm-hmm.
I still remember green eggs and ham day at my preschool. That was so long ago.
Would they put green food dye in the egg?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, fun.
It was just food dye.
Yeah.
That's it.
So cute.
Sarah Marshall of Marshall's Hot Sauce here. Looking for a hot sauce that's a little different? Let me introduce you to Tortuga Gordo Fermented Hot Sauce, makers of the Good Food Award-winning Green Cobra and Rotten Jerk hot sauces out of Portland, Oregon. Tortuga Gordo is waiting for you in the refrigerator section of Market of Choice, New Seasons, and your local co-op or bodega. Or find them online at www.tortugagordo.com. That's TORTUGAGORDO.com. They're not with the other hot sauces because they're not like the other hot sauces.
All right, before we move on to our interview segment, let's just talk a little bit about the recipe that we made this past week for our Joy Scouts Cooking Club. John, you actually made the recipe. Can you talk about it?
All right, you're trying to humiliate me.
No.
So yeah, it was a dill batter loaf. It's a delicious bread. It turned out well despite my incompetence or whatever. I overproofed it quite a bit. We have a bread proofer and I was just a little nervous, because, typically you want it to, like between 75 to 85 degrees. And the bread proofer was like out in the garage. And so I set it for 90 degrees.
Oh, no. I didn't know that. You didn't tell me that.
Yeah, well, anyways. So yeah, it was overproofed and it just turned into this big kind of overflowing mess in the oven. Thankfully, I had it on a rimmed baking sheet, so mischief managed or whatever.
Yeah. It was still delicious, though.
It was good. It's got some cottage cheese in there, some green onion, a ton of dill, some buttermilk. So it's nice and tangy.
Yeah, I love the tanginess of the bread. Last night we ate it with borscht and it was like the perfect bread for that.
Yeah, nice thick slices. Toasted a little bit, a little singed around the edges, but it was really good.
Yeah.
Do you guys always use a proofer? I've never used one. I'm like a proofer novice.
It's a relatively new addition to our kitchen.
Hence why I messed up.
Not always, not in the past, but it's nice if you don't have, if your house is a little cool on the cool side, or like for us, it's nice to be able to, like we have a pretty small kitchen. And so we do stash a lot of things in the garage, which is right next to the kitchen. So to be able to put it out there, even when it's cold outside, and have your little proofing box, it's very nice and convenient.
Yeah, I've used it for milk bread before.
If your recipe doesn't tell you to proof it, the step you're using it at is whenever you're putting it to the side to like rise.
Well, yeah, during the bulk fermentation, like the first fermentation, you would use it. And then like once you put it into a loaf pan, if it's a pan bread, during the second rise, you would also put it in there. It's also good for yogurt.
Yeah, I should do yogurt again. That was really good. On the subject of the dill bread, I did want to bring up, you were looking at old editions of Joy to see, how it had evolved over the years. And one was saying something like, now fresh dill is finally available in the markets. Occasionally.
That was the 97 edition.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't buy fresh herbs like in the marketplace before that.
I
really.
suppose not.
Yeah, Marion added the recipe in the 1975 edition. And, it calls for like dill weed or dill seed, obviously the dried variety.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but fresh dill is where it's at for that that bread.
Absolutely.
It makes it taste so much better. And this week's recipe is going to be the Miso Ramen on page 304. This is I love this recipe because it's pretty simple. Unlike a tonkatsu ramen, which requires a really long simmered stock, the miso ramen is a little more straightforward, and it's called a tare, but it's like a highly seasoned broth that has the red miso and I think sake and mirin and garlic and ginger, and then you add your noodles and whatever toppings you want. So it's really fun, versatile recipe, and you can kind of choose your own adventure with the toppings, which I love. And for a long time, we were buying frozen ramen noodles. There's a brand called Sun Noodle, and they make really, really great ramen noodles. But you can also just use the packages of dried ramen if that's what you have access to.
those are not all created equal. So definitely recommend the Nongshim personally.
We did a family trip to Uwijimaya, and we came back with mostly noodles. Yeah. Like all the different kinds of noodles. Like that's my daughter loves noodles. My husband loves noodles. And there's like every kind. They have like one row that's just packaged noodles. And then they have one row that's like refrigerator noodles full.
I love going there.
It's so fun. We came home with a million. And so every day this week, I didn't even really talk about what I ate this week because I was like, it's all noodles, man.
Which you kind of can't go wrong with a lot of times with kids. So
yeah, it's been really fun. I mean, we add all the stuff in our, like, I'll just kind of open the fridge. It's like the easiest thing. I'll just be like, okay, well, here's this package of like, we found these ones that they're called like ribbon cut.
Oh yeah, those
like,
are so good.
Yeah, like I think they're called knife cut.
Yeah, knife cut.
And those ones were a favorite. We got them dry and fresh. And then we've just like thrown every vegetable into it. And nice. you brought over some sauce. Of course, we have a million kinds of hot sauce. And so it's just like, it's the easiest dinner ever.
Yeah, those knife cut noodles have a great ruffly, the texture is really nice.
Yeah, they're kind of like bouncy a little bit. They're really good.
So yeah, please cook along with us this week. Make the miso ramen recipe. It's on page 304. You can tag us on Instagram at The Joy of Cooking or use the hashtag Joy Scouts. All right, Kristin. So first of all, what is your relationship with The Joy of Cooking?
It's funny. I ended up asking my mom about this last week because she always had a copy in the kitchen. It was there alongside the Betty Crocker cookbook. And then eventually, whenever the Silver Palette came out, then the Silver Palette joined it right next door. But I was asking her, I'm like, did you have any favorite recipes that you used to make from Joy? Because I distinctly remember there being like Silver Palette recipes, but I don't remember necessarily what was from Joy. And she was thinking about it and she's like, it really was just the reference. There's no internet. So you're like, how do I cook a pork chop? Or, how do I just those basic everyday things. So she's like, I used it all the time, but it obviously like followed the instructions, but she didn't have necessarily, other than like those basic components, she couldn't recall anyway. Like a specific recipe, but she was just saying, she got married in the 70s and it was just like every couple was given Betty Crocker and Joy. It was just a constant reference. And then I was curious. I was like, what? I don't even know. I know I had a copy, but I was like, what edition do I have? And so I have the 2006 and then I just got the 2019 and, so yeah, I think for me, it's just mostly been reference. I'll say that. How does The Joy of Cooking approach this?
Yeah, that's kind of, that's how we do have our favorite recipes, but we use it for reference all the time.
Yeah, there's definitely some signature recipes in there, but I feel like most people want to just turn to us as a resource, and that's exactly what Marianne wanted for sure. She wanted it to be kind of encyclopedic, repository of culinary knowledge.
Yeah. And for fun this week, though, I did cook. It was just coincidentally 2 chicken dishes from 2019, but the Chinese chicken salad and chicken piccata.
Nice.
And they're just like pitch perfect recipes, especially the Chinese chicken salad. My daughter was obsessed with it. So
that's such a good salad. It feels very retro, but in a good way. Not like a Jell-O mold.
Yeah, it's retro maybe partially because of the canned mandarin oranges, which you gotta love that texture. But yeah, it had like fresh ginger and just a lot of like texture from the crunch, including the chow mein noodles, which also I don't know, they remind me of like college salad bar,
Yes.
But I use the Napa cabbage as the base, and it's just, that's a vegetable. Every time I use it, I love it. And I'm like, why don't I use this every week? So anyway, it was really fun. And then the chicken piccata, again, just perfect balance of like the lemon and the butter and the capers. So
awesome.
Yeah, really fun.
John, I wanted to ask you a quick question because I think this is maybe the 3rd or 4th time that somebody has mentioned Joy of Cooking and the Betty Crocker cookbook together. Does that happen a lot? Where it's like, these were the things I was gifted when I moved out or whatever. I feel like this is a story that that is common. Do you guys have that cookbook? Do you know that cookbook?
Yeah, we have.
We
A
have here.
rivalry.
Yeah. Is there beef?
There's no beef.
It's hard to beef with,
An entity.
a
Yeah.
fictitious, yeah. I feel like we have your grandmother's Betty Crocker.
My grandmother's Betty Crocker that she got when she got married, or possibly even when she was in home ec in high school. It's one of the 3-ring binder kind of cookbooks.
That's what my mom had too.
And it actually has a metal, like the spine is metal and it's all rusted.
Yeah, it makes me nervous to
To handle it.
Might get some tetanus.
yeah, there's a worry about tetanus, but also like it might actually scratch the shelves.
Well, I'm always worried about it falling apart because she obviously used it a lot, and it's stuffed full of note cards and things and written in. But it's really fun to look at. The illustrations are wild, very like 1950s housewife kind of illustrations, but it's not a book I've ever cooked out of. And she wasn't using it when I was growing up, like when I was little. I think she had, stopped. She doesn't need it. She doesn't cook from recipes really anymore, I don't think.
Right.
So, but yeah, we definitely have a copy of that, and I don't think there's any rivalry, but a lot of people do get both of them.
Well, when we first started working for Joy, I remember we specifically went out to get like the newest edition of Betty Crocker just to, to check out the quote unquote competition. I guess that's how we viewed it back then, but I certainly don't feel that way anymore.
Yeah, I mean, my mom was saying like in her mind they were pretty different. Whereas she thought of Betty Crocker as using. I mean, it seemed to embrace more, I guess like processed ingredients. And Joy, she's like, I went to it more for like, how do you do a homemade version of hollandaise or something? So she used them both equally, but they serve different purposes in her kitchen.
Speaking of cookbooks, what cookbooks, if any, do you keep in your kitchen?
To be honest, I rotate it because just to keep it interesting, I guess. But there are some baking books that have been in there for a couple of years, so it's pretty good. Like Yassi Arafi's Snacking Cakes.
Oh, that's a great book.
Yeah, and then Sarah Kiefer's 100 Cookies. I'm not an avid baker, but if I do bake, I look to those two first because the recipes are so good. The snacking cakes recipes are so easy. If you just need, I just need a cake. You don't want to dirty a lot of dishes, but you also want something flexible because a lot of times those recipes are written to be, she addresses, if you want to bake it in this pan or this pan, if you want to add this to make it more like this. So I think that's the kind of cook I am. So if I'm going to bake, that way of doing so speaks to me.
Yeah, and I love having options or knowing what the options are as a cook, and that's something I think about too when I'm developing a recipe. Like where are the opportunities for, what if somebody only has a loaf pan? What if somebody only has a muffin tin? Like how can we kind of accommodate
Adjust
that?
this.
Yeah. As a cookbook author and collaborator, what makes a really great cookbook in your opinion?
I think
that's a really big
Yeah.
question.
Well, yeah,
Sorry.
and I don't know that it's like if there's like one thing, and it is in the end service to a reader, but I think that service can be different things. There are cookbooks there to be those like friendly kitchen companions that are going to live in your kitchen. You're going to pull them down. They're going to get stained. But I still also believe in the value of cookbooks just to be this like transportive piece of literature that you read in bed. And yes, maybe you'll make the recipes, but is the doability of the recipe is the most important thing. I mean, yes, we hope those recipes work, but do those recipes need to be things that you can go get the ingredients for right now and make it? To me, I don't think every book needs to serve that purpose. So I guess in the end, it's like, does the book live up to its promise? That's what makes a great cookbook. But I think those promises can be pretty varied.
I have a question because I feel like you make people's like culinary book dreams come true, and you take their idea and you help them do, pitches and all these things. But when did you have that moment that was going to be a path that you were going to go down? Like when did you decide that you were going to help people make their book dreams come true?
It's a good question. I don't know if there's one moment, but it's been like an evolution, I guess. I worked at Food and Wine magazine for many years, and I through that learned how to write recipes, edit recipes, sort of like sell recipes, you know? I mean, there's like this selling aspect to it. So when I left the magazine, I had in mind like, oh, it would be cool to work on cookbooks with other people. Melissa Clark, who writes for the New York Times, that's what she did all the time. I mean, she was a cookbook collaborator, and I was like, wow, that is such a cool job. And I had some friends who did that and talked to them a lot about it. It took me a while to figure out how to kind of get in, but then once I started doing it, then I started to feel pretty good at it. So I guess it wasn't one moment, but yeah, now that I have been doing it, there are times when I'm like, wow, I do feel like I bring all this value, and it comes just from this long career of experience. So, but I do like helping other people tell their stories. I've realized that that's even, I wrote my own cookbook called Modern Potluck, and people are always like, oh, are you going to do another book? And I still don't know, like I have to feel really excited. And right now what excites me most is other people's stories and helping them tell their stories, making their cookbook dreams come true, as you say. That feels more gratifying to me. But if someday there is something that gets me really excited, really jazzed, then maybe I'll do another book.
I love that. That's kind of some hidden advice that you shared, which is like, when you're thinking about a cookbook project, are you really excited about this? Because you need to be. You're going to need
years, as you know.
Yeah, it's years,
oh my gosh.
So much work. Yeah, so you need that enthusiasm to help make the project. I mean, I think it should still be fun. It's work, but it should be enjoyable, and it should be something that you really care about.
Yeah. Yeah. We often say you need to have something to say, right? I mean, and I also like to emphasize that you need to have someone you're talking to, like people who want that message or, want what you're offering. And anymore in publishing, I feel like you kind of need that audience first. It doesn't always have to be through social media, although there's a lot of emphasis on that, but you need to have some idea of like, who's going to be excited about this? Who am I talking to? And I think that ties back to like what makes a good book, Does the book live up to its promise? Is it helping this audience or inspiring this audience that you're hoping to reach?
I feel like that's a tension that we've struggled with the Joy, with the new edition, just because, we're trying to reach such a broad readership that it's hard to craft a book to try to meet the needs of such a wide audience. And I guess when you have a wide readership, it seems like completely contrary to what you would be doing if you were trying to craft a cookbook proposal. Like you want to have a more defined audience, whereas, with The Joy of Cooking, we were trying to reach such a wide swath of readers.
And the voice is kind of set for Joy of Cooking. Like the way the recipes are written and the style that they're written in are a way that has been done. So it's a little bit different than like when you're creating a totally different proposal from scratch and you're trying to put yourself into it. It's almost like different for you guys, right?
Yeah, it's like John was saying, it's such a big audience. We wanted to include as many people as we could in the kind of the message. But now that we have a little distance on it, I actually do think we could not narrow the audience necessarily, but have a little bit more of an idea of who is using the book and how we could speak to those people better. And you're right, the book already has a voice, a very distinctive voice that I think over the 10 years that we spent working on the 2019 edition, we really kind of absorbed Irma's and Marion's voice. But now when I read it, sometimes I think, and it's not like a bad thing. It's just like, oh, I think we could make this a little more approachable. Or sometimes the language we use in the book is more formal, and I think we could, make it a little more casual. These are the quiet thoughts, I think, when I'm alone.
Man, I would love to just be a fly on the wall during some of your discussions. Oh my gosh. We'll definitely have to have you on the podcast though, so we can like really get into the
Yeah, I would love to do that.
Yeah. Because I'm sure you're probably working on what's next and
thinking about it. And it's nice to have other people to just bounce ideas off of, because John and I, we just worked together for the most part, and it's just the two of us. So it would be I think it would be healthy to have other people that we're talking to as we start this process again.
No, it does sound luxurious.
Yeah.
Just having some company.
Kristen, how do you help people find their voice as they're crafting cookbooks? And because I feel like you become part coach, therapist, and writing coach all at the same time.
Yeah, well, and then sometimes I'm actually the writer, right? So sometimes I'm literally writing it for them, which is a totally different thing. I don't know. I guess just by like finding the nuggets when they are writing that I get excited about, and then sort of encouraging, like, go deeper here. But I will say that I've more in the past year, I've been spending most of my time working on that book, Turtle Island. So a lot of that has just been more in the like drawing out of a voice and then me actually helping write. I think soon enough I'm going to be switching back to like helping other people craft. But yeah, I think sometimes just in general, we can see like the potential of a person more than they can see themselves. Not just in cookbook writing, in anything, you know? And so it's like helping people push through that self-doubt or that little thing that might be holding them back. Because you're like, no, I see it, you know? I see this potential.
Yeah, I love finding those as an editor when you read a story or you read an essay. It's kind of like the parts that are boring, maybe they need to be cut. And the parts that are really interesting, it's like, ooh, tell me more about that. Like, I want to know more about this thing that you just said, because that's really interesting.
Yeah. And sometimes you can't, because if you're such an expert, you forget, you know, you almost like lose track of what might be interesting to people.
Yeah.
I do think that there's like a value in teaching in some ways, like teaching, like cooking teachers. Molly Stevens was a cooking teacher for so long. And in some, you're just getting this live feedback from people and seeing the gaps in their knowledge. So you don't forget necessarily, or, you know, I know Sarah, like you're at the market a lot. So you're probably just talking with people all the time and in touch with what they need. So, but totally, I agree with you as an editor, sometimes, you know, it's called burying the lead sometimes, right? It's like people.
But that's the thing that you really helped me with in the class too, was like, I am in front of people all the time and I'm usually telling them how to cook something with produce from the market. So I'm like, oh yeah, you take this, and I try to do these very simple, like, you know, under 5 ingredients, like just using this vegetable. And then I'll like post it on a recipe card or something that I can just hand them real quick. And I never think about the names of things and making them sound really appealing, because I'll be like, oh yeah, do these like butter radishes or whatever. Like it'll just be like the simplest title. And when I was in your class, as soon as you would like say what I called something in your, I think of it as like magazine voice.
Oh,
It was like, oh, right. People have to just read the title and want to make it, because usually I'm just there telling them about it and they're like, yeah, I'm totally going to make this. But it's different when it's on paper than when it's in person,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
when I'm
totally.
not there to sell it to them, you know? And so I now pay attention to like titles of things, but I never did before. I just called it like whatever it was, like the 3 main ingredients of the dish. That was it.
Oh yeah, chefs do that a lot. You know, it'll be like radish, butter, chive, or whatever. Yeah, it's interesting, and I guess it is a magazine-y thing, because you know, magazines, it's editorial, but there is a sales aspect to it where you're like trying to sell the recipe, and it's funny that I ended up doing more and more copywriting, because there's, you know, that's a very like salesy way of writing to a certain extent, but I always frame it as just trying to be, you know, empathetic. Like you're trying to get into somebody's like mind a little bit and be like, what do they really want? Like, you know, what can I say that will make them excited? And I do think that's important for, especially just like with the attention. I mean, our attention is so divided constantly. So I don't know, a little bit of that like sales type of language. And by that, I just mean, yeah, making something sound yummy.
Speaking of sales, what sells you on a recipe? What is there something that you really respond to beyond just the titling?
Yeah, it's like the word pistachio. It's funny. Even when I worked at Food and Wine, I guess there was like an inside joke in the kitchen where they were like, "Oh, if it has pistachios, Kristen's going to be like, this is so good." Like something I didn't even realize about myself. But yeah, like pistachio or pistachio and lemon together. often sells me. But what else? I do like when things are at this point in my life like fairly short. Either, if it doesn't even have to be a short ingredient list, but it has to be a short list of things that I need to buy. Like if it's, if you have all the condiments in your fridge or in your cabinet and it's a few things you add, I'm fine with a longer ingredient list. But I guess generally easy to source unless I'm looking for that project. And I think I forget who it was who we spoke to, but there was might be Andy Baragani, and he has this rule when writing a recipe that's either your ingredient list is long and your method's short, or your method is long and your ingredient list is short. And that makes sense to me. And I think subconsciously that draws me to a recipe sometimes, one or the other. But it is fun when something has a little twist.
Those are a nice common sense appeal to that. You're either spending a lot of time sourcing or a lot of time in the kitchen. So
yeah, something has to give. So you can't have all the things all the time. It kind of reminds me of when we have some friends who they like to go hiking a lot. And their rule is like it can be wet and windy, but it can't be wet, windy, and cold. Like if it's all three things, not going. And that's how I feel about recipes. Like you were saying, like, if the ingredient list is long and the method is long and I have to make a special trip, it's just probably not going to happen,
Yeah, totally. Or it's like if it's for some reason just sounds so amazing, then I set aside that time, but that's not going to be what I'm going to make every week.
Mm-hmm. Since you have written a book about potlucks, what is your go-to potluck dish?
It's so funny. Some of the recipes in Modern Potluck are still my go-to recipes. One is the carrots and lentils on the cover. That's a dish I make regularly still at home. It's one of those dishes where it's like, it's a framework and you can totally vary it. So to tell the truth, I don't even remember what exactly is in the recipe from us. Like the carrots have a spice mixture tossed on them before they're roasted. And I think that there is like a dried fruit and nut at the end, but I actually don't even remember. And I vary that all the time. So it's like, sometimes there's dried figs, sometimes it's dates, but I will bring that to certain gatherings, especially in those summer months. Let's think. There are a couple of really easy tomato salads in the book that I'll make in the summer. One is I think I called it like vegan caprese, but it's really this white beans cooked till they're fairly soft. So they get kind of lightly mashed with olive oil. I don't totally remember what else. Salt, probably some kind of aromatic thing. And then that's served with a tomato salad. And there is like this creamy tomato-y combo that happens. But there's another version where I actually use ricotta. And it's a bed of ricotta that's seasoned. And then you put the tomatoes in the center. And it gets really messy. And that's part of the fun. So I'll make that a lot in the summer. What else?
Yeah, I feel like there's anything that is delicious at room temperature. It's kind of a potluck situation.
There's a chapter just on those room temperature dishes and certainly baking. But then some things, that can be good hot that you can keep hot, like that serve a crowd, like a big braised thing or a casserole type thing. Yeah, growing up, I have a large extended family in the area, so growing up, everything was a potluck, more or less. And everybody comes with their crock pots.
Yes, I was going to say that was how I grew up as well. Like big family, lots of potlucks, lots of crock pots. And I remember they had these little, I don't know what you call them, but it's like a carrying case for your Pyrex.
Yeah,
and it keeps it warm. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think things that hold up at room temperature are perfect for potlucks, especially if you don't know the ambient temperature or the electrical situation. But there's always ways to make warm dishes work for certain parties if you can bring that crock pot or casserole carrier, as you're describing.
I still remember being so impressed with the Christmas potluck situation at your family's ancestral cabin that I just remember taking the iPhone that had just come out with the panorama feature and just going down the entire table. Of course, looking back at that picture, it's like pretty hard to decipher what's going on.
Yeah, but pretty epic. You can tell something epic is going on. Yeah. Kristin, where can our listeners follow you?
So I am on Instagram at Kristin C. Donnelly. Don't forget the little C in the middle. But then online at kristindonnelly.com.
Cooking with matcha, it all starts with the right tea. And that's where you need to pick Mizuba Tea Co., sourced directly from heritage tea farms in Japan. Mizuba's matcha is crafted by award-winning farms in Yuji, Japan. Vibrant, umami-rich, and stone-milled per traditional methods. It's the top quality ingredient for lattes, desserts, and even savory dishes. Not to mention whisking on its own as a ceremonial-style matcha. Whether you're making a matcha cheesecake or dreaming of a spring matcha tiramisu, start with the best. Taste the tradition. Shop at mizubatea.com. That's mizubatea.com. And use the code Joy of Matcha, that's JOYOFMATCHA, for 15% off your first order.
All right, so now we're going to jump into our weekly topic, which is veggie-friendly or veggie-heavy noodle dishes. So Sarah, could you please play the question for us?
This is Ashley calling from Denver. Thank you for your wonderful podcast. It has quickly become my favorite. My question is about cooking for a 12-year-old who loves sushi. He also really likes ramen and noodle dishes, but I'm looking to expand his horizons a little more, and especially to incorporate more vegetables into the Asian spectrum of foods we eat. So it seems like you have a lot of ideas about using different vegetables, and if you have any recipes for not stir fries, but noodles, I would love to hear them. Thanks.
Thanks for the question, Ashley, and thanks for listening to the show. That's really awesome, and I love hearing that people like the podcast. That's rad. So the first thing that came to mind for me was sesame noodles. So we do have a recipe for sesame noodles. Enjoy. It's on page 302, and I think of it as like kind of a kid-friendly just flavor combo because you've got like that. It's almost like a peanut butter. I mean, it's sesame, but it has a peanut butter vibe.
And we were talking about how it would be kind of a great base for maybe doing just like some steamed or some roasted broccoli.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just make a little bit extra of that sauce. And I feel like that sauce could almost be like, it would be like the equivalent of putting like a creamy cheddar sauce, and
on your broccoli,
hiding broccoli underneath or whatever. You could use that sauce on any vegetable. And I think I would imagine that a lot of kids would be into it.
Yeah, I was also thinking that dish would be really good with roasted sweet potatoes. Either cubed. I like to just cut the sweet potato in half down the middle and roast it cut side down on a baking sheet because that cuts the time in half that it takes to roast it. But that would be really delicious with that sesame sauce. And the recipe does have cucumber and carrot in it already, raw. But yeah, I think it would be great with even more veggies.
One of the Joy recipes that I like to make for Adeline is the honey glazed carrots that you guys have. And then we'll do those, but then toss them with noodles. And it's like a great kid-friendly thing. I think anytime you can add a little sweetness, like with honey or maple and roast things with vegetables, kids seem to be pretty into it. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a good trick. I don't think you necessarily have to trick kids into eating vegetables, but I just think it like makes it appealing to them. The other thing that I was going to talk about is like in our house, we always do really interactive eating. So, our kid's kind of a busybody. She doesn't like to sit still. So like dinner, if we make it an interactive experience, we'll do like salad rolls where you can like we'll just chop all these different vegetables and they can make their own things. But with those ones, you can dip the rice paper in the water and then the kids can roll their own. That's a really fun way. And then another way to do things is like, of course, everybody likes fried food, but doing like tempura vegetables. But sometimes if you make the batter really thick, then the kids can't really tell what the vegetables are. And so it's like more, rather than hiding it, it's more of a guessing game. Like, is this a potato or is this a parsnip or, whatever it is. And so that's kind of a fun way to get them to try new things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then there's also, you could just lean into the love of ramen, I mean, there's plenty of toppings that you could put on that ramen that would make it more wholesome, more vegetable centric. Corn kernels like on top, that's a pretty classic.
I like to saute the corn kernels in butter and then put them on something about the butter. Butter and ramen is so good. I mean, butter is just good. But that and roasted mushrooms is another favorite ramen topping.
Bamboo shoots. That might be a non-starter, I'm not sure. But
also like a roasted tomato, like a halved, kind of charred, maybe broiled. Or you could roast some cherry tomatoes. That might be easier, but that would be a fun topping. Another thing that I just thought of that is, it's not a noodle dish per se, but you do serve noodles with it often, is hot pot, which is super fun and interactive, and you get to choose what you put in the pot, and any veggie is kind of fair game for that. Yeah, I always have a really good time when we make hot pot. I feel like a big kid. I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna put a sweet potato in there. I'm gonna put a lotus root in there.
Yeah. See, even adults like the interactive experience.
Absolutely.
It just makes it so fun.
I had a few thoughts, which is so I wrote this short stack about cauliflower, and I'm realizing like, oh, and you could roast cauliflower and put it on the ramen. But I also tend to always keep around a bag of the frozen cauliflower rice just because it's so easy to throw into stuff. You were talking about salad wraps, but I feel like with lettuce wraps, you could make a really seasoned something where maybe there's like walnuts and cauliflower rice and I don't know, like whether it's beans or like play around with mixtures that might almost have a ground meat like texture, but make it really seasoned. And then, like toppings and make that interactive. And we make a lot of fried rice at my house.
Yeah.
Perhaps even more than noodles anymore. And obviously that's a great, like, just throw in any veggie. And I think because we're in the seasons, like this transition from winter to spring, and our spring takes a while to get started, I've been buying a lot more frozen vegetables just to have, like, the cauliflower rice, but also frozen peas, I feel like tend to be pretty good. Yeah. Oh, and one more is I don't know, every so often I'll make almost like nachos, but basically sliced roasted sweet potatoes as sort of like the base.
Oh, okay.
So
that's
they're not
fun.
always crispy, you know. You can get it toward a crispier thing, but it's less about that. But it's like you roast these sweet potato coins, and then you layer on some kind of flavorful bean topping, and then obviously do whatever else you want. And it could be, you know, a bunch of cheese or various hot sauces. And I feel like with that, like we were talking about at the beginning, with some kids really loving that, like lots of umami. That's a really good way to bring that in, but also have it be very veggie oriented.
I love that idea. I was also thinking a lot about udon because I just love the texture of udon so much. And you can do a lot with it. Like I remember we've done like a Japanese curry udon dish, and we'll put, you know, chunks of carrots in there and potatoes and things like that, and serve it with some steamed bok choy on the side. And it's such a hearty, it's like, it feels like it's just very comforting meal. And that curry sauce is so delicious. But we also brought another book that you should definitely check out for good veggie recipes is Tender Heart by Hetty McKinnon. I looked in the index just to see what noodle dishes she has in there, and there are quite a few.
Yeah,
so.
it's like 24.
Yeah.
That's a great one. She is just a recipe machine.
Yeah.
And she's really good at like bringing in lots of veggies, and then there always being something that's a little bit interesting or a twist, and often not needing to source a lot of things, especially if you have a pretty good pantry.
Yeah, I was eyeing the mushroom cow soy.
Yeah, that looks really excellent.
I love cow soy. Highly recommend cow soy. I think the caller was also just like, oh, we need to branch out a little bit. And, you know, there are a lot of other noodle soups out there that are fantastic.
Yeah, Ashley, I hope we gave you enough ideas. I think it was really fun to answer your question. So thanks again for calling in.
If you have a topic, ingredient, or joy story to share, call our hotline at 503-395-8858. Leave us a message or send us a text. We'd love to hear from you. And next week's topic comes from our caller.
I recently made joy of cooking chicken tagine with chickpeas. You use preserved lemons in the recipe, and now I have a whole jar of preserved lemons. What are some of your favorite recipes with preserved lemons?
Awesome. I love this question. And this is like the classic thing that happens where you buy a ingredient and then don't know what to do with it. So I'm looking forward to answering this one next week. All right, everybody. What are we thinking about for this week? What are we cooking?
Well, we went on a family trip to Powell's yesterday, which can be dangerous because, of course, their cookbook section is amazing. So Dirk picked out a cookbook called Cuisine on Screen. And I think when he was on the show, he talked about a movie, Little Forest, but there's some recipes from in that.
Oh, that's cool.
And they do like a tempura fried cabbage. And so we're going to make that. And some of the other recipes from the book. So that's what I'm stoked on. And it's a beautiful book if anybody's interested in film and food. It goes through all these different Japanese movies and then gives you the recipes from them.
I love that.
Yeah, it's very
That's a perfect book for Dirk, too.
Yeah, I know. He was stoked. So.
I think tomorrow or Tuesday, I'm going to be making a rhubarb conserve recipe that's in Joy. And that's a fantastic recipe. I haven't made it in a few years, but it's almost between a jam and a marmalade. It has, you take an orange and a lemon and you thinly slice them, and then you cook them with rhubarb. And I think golden raisins are in there, and there's fresh ginger. But it's just a really nice way to use rhubarb. And if you use like the bright pink stuff, it turns out a beautiful color. So that's what I'm bringing to Canning Club this week.
Ooh, I'm so excited. I forgot it was Canning Club week.
That's so Portland.
Yeah. We can pickle that.
That's honestly how I've made, when we moved to Portland in 2013, that was how I kind of made all my friends in Portland, was I found the Canning Club and everybody was pretty rad. So I've just been hanging out with those people ever since.
Yeah, that's how we met.
Yeah.
I mean,
awesome.
clearly it worked.
We're also getting our last winter CSA this week. And I noticed that we're supposed to get one final winter squash, which I love winter squash. I'm kind of glad it's almost over, though.
You need a break.
It's time.
Like when you need a break, you need a break.
Yeah.
I did see that there was some green garlic in the market. So maybe combine, the first of the spring green garlic with some of the last winter squash.
I like that idea. Yeah. It's a good idea. What about you, Kristin? What are you cooking this week or thinking about?
Well, as I mentioned, I've asked my daughter to send me videos, so what she wants. So this might actually be really good for the caller, which she sent me a cucumber sushi where you basically create ribbons from the cucumber and overlap them. And this one in particular has looks like a tuna salad and some lettuce, as well as hot sauce. And there's like a cream cheese base. I don't know. We'll see. But there'll be something inspired by this, I have a feeling. But this feels like a good idea, perhaps, for that caller as well, to play around with basically using cucumber as a wrapper, but maybe with sushi-style fillings.
Nice. Yeah, that's a really good suggestion. You could go in a lot of directions from there.
Yeah.
Yeah, my first instinct was, have you heard of this thing called chirashi? It's a lot easier than making sushi.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Right.
Just,
Put it on rice.
yeah, just put it on rice.
Well, there's also the hand rolls.
True.
You could do hand rolls. That's kind of fun for a kid.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fun for me.
I've done them. And just, like general rice bowls.
We'll just put out just pieces of seaweed and you can just like grab all the different things. So it's kind of like non-fussy sushi. You just like do it yourself at the table.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to the Joy of Cooking podcast. Before we go, show some love for your favorite podcast by subscribing to the show and leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts and iTunes. Follow us at joyofcooking.substack.com and on Instagram at thejoyofcooking. Stay tuned for next week where we will tackle, what are we tackling? We're tackling preserved lemon. And don't forget to make this week's recipe, Miso Ramen, on page 304. Call in with questions, hopes, history, or where you find joy in the kitchen. Our number is 503-395-8858. That's 503-395-8858.
And we could not do this without our fantastic team at Joy of Creation Production House. Thank you to Dave Drusky, our production coordinator, and Haley Bowers, our audio engineer.